Galileo and the Church, a story never truly understood. Behind the fame of Galileo Galilei as one of the greatest scientists of the 17th century lies a story clouded for centuries by misunderstandings, distortions, and even myths. One of the most common claims is that Galileo was executed by the Catholic Church for declaring that the earth revolves around the sun. But let us trace this story from the beginning, not as a judgment, but as a search for historical truth. Before Galileo, Copernicus and the Church's support. Long before Galileo was born, Nicholas Copernicus, a Catholic scientist from Poland, had formulated the heliocentric theory, which stated that the sun is the center of the solar system. His book, De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, was even published with the support of church figures, including Cardinal Schönberg and Bishop Tiedemann Gysi, and was approved by Pope Paul III. At that time, however, in the spirit of scientific caution, Copernicus' theory was considered a hypothesis, not an absolute truth. The Catholic Church did not reject it. In fact, the strongest opposition came from Protestant theologians, including Martin Luther, who mocked Copernicus as a fool who wants to overturn astronomy. The rise of Galileo, bold but hasty. Born in 1564, Galileo Galilei did not merely read Copernicus' theory, he wanted to prove it. With his hand-made telescope, he observed stars, the moon, and planets. He discovered that Jupiter had its own satellites, shaking the old belief that all celestial bodies revolved around the Earth. But Galileo did something controversial. He declared that heliocentrism was not just a theory, but the truth, even absolute truth, though the scientific evidence at the time was still insufficient. For example, he claimed that ocean tides proved the Earth's motion, a theory that was scientifically incorrect. Even Albert Einstein later remarked that Galileo's argument was interesting, but not true. Encounters with the Church, dialogue that turned into conflict. The Catholic Church was actually quite open to science. Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, a leading church figure of the time, even said, "If one day it is proven scientifically that the earth revolves around the sun, then we must reconsider our understanding of Scripture." However, Galileo was seen as too aggressive. He urged the Church to immediately accept heliocentrism as the only truth and to reinterpret Scripture passages that seemed to suggest the earth was immovable. In 1616, the Church declared that the heliocentric theory was not yet proven and contradicted Scripture when taken literally. Galileo was asked not to teach it as truth. The Height of Tension, a book that sparked fire. Galileo initially complied, until Pope Urban VIII, once his supporter, granted him permission to write a book comparing the geocentric and heliocentric systems. The Pope only asked that both perspectives be presented fairly. But Galileo was not neutral. In his dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, he introduced a character named Simplicio, who defended geocentrism, and indirectly represented the Pope's own view. Unfortunately, Simplicio was portrayed as a fool. This was the turning point. The Pope felt insulted. The Jesuits withdrew their support. Galileo was summoned before the Inquisition in 1633. The trial and punishment, not as the myth suggests. Many believe Galileo was tortured or burned at the stake. This is not true. He was never imprisoned in a dark cell or physically tortured. Instead, he was sentenced to house arrest in a comfortable villa near Florence. There, he continued to write, receive visitors, and was even personally blessed by the Pope. Galileo died in 1642 at the age of 77. He was buried in the Church of Santa Croce, Florence, an extraordinary honor for someone supposedly condemned by the Church. What went wrong? Who was at fault? To be fair, both Galileo and the Church made mistakes. Galileo insisted on declaring truth without sufficient scientific proof. The Church, at that time, may have been too rigid in responding to new approaches to Scripture. It is also worth noting, Galileo's own theory was not entirely correct. He claimed the sun was the center of the universe and immovable. Today we know the sun itself moves within the galaxy and is not the center of the universe. Conclusion, a reconciliation. The Catholic Church did not stop there. In 1893, Pope Leo XIII issued the encyclical Providentissimus Deus, affirming that faith and science can never truly contradict each other. In 1992, Pope John Paul II formally expressed regret for the Church's treatment of Galileo. Today, Galileo is remembered as a hero of science. But his story is not as simple as scientist versus religion. More than that, it is the story of how human beings, both scientists and religious institutions, struggle to seek truth within the limits of their time. The lesson from this story? That truth cannot be forced before its time, and that both faith and science, when pursued with humility, will illuminate one another.